My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stood in the driveway holding a casserole dish covered in foil. Behind me, my husband of 41 years stood perfectly still in his good flannel shirt, the one he only wore for occasions that mattered. Our son looked us in the eye and said, "Mom, Dad, this isn't a good time. Actually, it's never going to be a good time. We need you to leave." He had no idea I was still on the escrow account. One phone call and the entire closing could unravel. I remember thinking that morning how proud I was. We had driven 2 hours from Clover Hill to Ashford for the housewarming. Our son Nathan had closed on his first home 3 weeks earlier, a 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet cul-de-sac in one of the better school districts outside the city. My husband Gerald and I had contributed $78,000 toward the down payment. Not a loan, a gift. Because that's what you do when your child is ready to build a life and you have the savings to help. I had spent the night before making my grandmother's chicken and rice casserole, the same one I always brought when someone in our family moved into a new place. There's a tradition in my family where you never let someone eat takeout on their first night in a new home. I had also wrapped a small framed print of a cardinal, because Nathan always said cardinals reminded him of my mother, who passed 8 years ago. The drive had been pleasant. Gerald and I talked about whether the guest room might finally become the quilting room I had always wanted, now that Nathan had his own space. We talked about Thanksgiving, whether he and his wife Cynthia might host for the first time, how the grandchildren might come eventually and need somewhere to sleep when they visited us. We were happy. We were genuinely happy for them. When we pulled onto Birchwood Court, the street was already lined with cars. There were cars I didn't recognize, nice ones, the kind with dealership plates still on them. Through the front bay window, I could see people inside. A lot of people. Gerald found a spot at the end of the block. We walked up together, me carrying the casserole, him holding the wrapped pring under his arm. Nathan's neighbor was out front with a small dog and gave us a polite nod. We smiled back. We were still smiling when Nathan opened the door before we even knocked. He looked startled. Not happy startled. The other kind. "Mom!" He stepped outside and pulled the door nearly closed behind him. "What are you doing here?" I laughed a little, thinking he was joking. "We talked about today, sweetheart, the housewarming. I brought your grandmother's casserole." He glanced back through the window. Then he looked at Gerald. Then at me. "I should have called," he said. "I meant to call. Things changed. Cynthia's family is all here and it's really just for her side right now. Her parents had a specific idea about how they wanted this to go and look, it's complicated." Gerald spoke first, slow and steady the way he always does. "Nathan, we helped you buy this house. I know that, Dad. I know, and I appreciate it more than you know. But Cynthia's mom has been planning this for weeks, and she has a whole vision, and I can't disrupt that right now. I need you to understand." I looked past him through the glass. I could see a woman I recognized as Cynthia's mother, Pamela, standing near the fireplace in a silk blouse, laughing with a group of women I had never met. There were flower arrangements on every surface, catered trays, people in cocktail attire, at a Sunday afternoon housewarming. "You want us to leave," I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't say no. I stood there for a moment holding that casserole dish, the foil still perfectly crimped at the edges, and I felt something go very quiet inside me. Not sadness yet. More like the sensation you get right before you realize something is broken and cannot be unbroken. "We understand," I said. Gerald took my elbow. We walked back down the porch steps. We got in the car. I put the casserole on the back seat. Gerald sat with his hands on the wheel and didn't start the engine. We didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "Our name is still on the escrow paperwork." I nodded. "The title company," he said, "and the gift letter. Everything went through our attorney. We had structured the down payment carefully because our financial advisor had suggested it. The gift documentation had been drawn up through an estate planning attorney who handled our wills. Nothing had been finalized informally. Every transfer, every signature, every letter of intent had our names on it. Gerald is a methodical man. He was a civil engineer for 34 years. He does not make phone calls in anger. He drove to the Perkins 3 miles from Nathan's house, ordered 2 coffees he barely touched, and sat across from me in a corner booth while we talked through what we wanted to do. The thing about being in your 60s is that you have already lived through enough to know the difference between a misunderstanding and a pattern. This was not a misunderstanding. I thought about the refrigerator. 2 years ago, when Nathan and Cynthia got their apartment, we bought them a refrigerator. Not because they asked, because they mentioned offhandedly that the one in the unit was old and the freezer didn't seal right. So Gerald and I drove to the appliance store, picked one out, paid for delivery and installation, and arranged the whole thing. When I texted Nathan to tell him, he replied, "Cake, thanks." Not even a full word. I thought about Christmas. The year before last, when we drove 4 hours round trip to bring gifts to their apartment, and Cynthia's family was already there, filling up the living room. And Cynthia's mother had apparently already taken over the kitchen and made it clear without saying a word that our presence was an interruption to a party already underway. I thought about the phone calls Nathan didn't return, the birthday dinners that got canceled with 2 hours' notice, the time I mentioned I'd love to see the apartment since I'd never been inside, and Nathan said, "Yeah, we'll figure something out," and nothing was ever figured out. I thought about the way Cynthia looked at me at their engagement party. Not unkind, exactly. More like I was a problem she was tolerating. Gerald pulled out his phone. He was very calm. He called our attorney, Martin, who we had been using since we bought our own house in 1987. It was a Sunday, so we left a message explaining the situation and asking Martin to review our documentation. Then I called the title company. I knew it was closed, so I left a message with the after-hours line noting that I wanted to flag a concern about a recent transaction and asking for a callback on Monday. We drove home. I don't remember most of that drive. I kept looking at the casserole on the back seat, still warm under the foil. When we got home, I put the casserole in the refrigerator and sat at the kitchen table and finally let myself cry, not dramatically. The quiet kind of crying that you do when something you loved for a long time is finally, clearly, gone. Gerald made tea. He sat with me without saying much, which is exactly what I needed. Later that night, the text started. Nathan first. "Mom, are you upset? I'm sorry it was awkward. Call me tomorrow." Then Cynthia, "Hi Ruth, hope you understand it was nothing personal. Pamela had a very specific plan for today. Ruth." She called me Ruth. In 4 years of being engaged and then married to my son, she had called me by my first name exactly once before, and that was when she needed to know my social security number for a form Nathan was filling out for the mortgage. I didn't respond to either of them. Gerald had one response: "We'll talk when we're ready." Monday morning, Martin called back before 9. He was brief and precise. Our names were still listed on the gift letter and the supporting loan documentation for the down payment. The transaction was fully recorded, and there was a standard repayment clause in the gift letter, something our attorney had added as a formality, which technically created a lien-like structure in certain circumstances. Martin was careful about what he said, but the implication was clear. If we wanted to pursue this, we had standing. We didn't want to pursue anything legally. That was never the point. The point was that we needed to understand what we had given and what we had gotten in return. We spent that week quietly. Gerald went to his Tuesday morning breakfast with the retired engineers group he'd belonged to for 12 years. I went to my book club on Wednesday. We didn't tell anyone what had happened. It didn't feel like something to share yet. It felt like something to sit with first. By Thursday, my daughter-in-law's mother, Pamela, had called me. I almost didn't answer. Then I thought, I want to hear what she says. "Ruth," she began, her voice warm and measured in the way of someone who has prepared what they intend to say. "I just wanted to reach out personally. I hope there are no hard feelings about Sunday. These things can get complicated when two families have different expectations." "Different expectations?" I repeated. Cynthia and I had been planning the housewarming for several weeks. We had the caterer, the florist, the whole timeline. You know how it is. "I don't actually. No one told us there was a plan." A brief pause. I assumed Nathan had communicated. He hadn't. Another pause, longer this time. "Well, I do hope we can all move forward. Family harmony is so important." "Pamela," I said, "did you know Gerald and I provided the down payment for that house?" Silence. "All $78,000, I continued. "That's not a criticism. I'm just clarifying, since we're talking about expectations." She said something about being sure we would all find a way to come together. I said I was sure we would too, and I ended the call. I wrote down what she had said, almost word for word. I don't know why. It just felt important to have a record. The next week, I did something I had been putting off for 3 years. I called a therapist. Her name was Dr. Paez. Adela Reyes and a friend from church have mentioned her twice over the past year. I had always said I would look into it, and never did. I made an appointment for the following Tuesday. Gerald raised an eyebrow when I told him. Not against it. Surprised. Is this about Nathan? He asked. It's about me, I said. I keep giving things away and then acting surprised when they don't come back. He thought about that for a moment. Then I'll make an appointment too. That made me love him more than I had in years. Or maybe the same amount I always had, but I noticed it more. The Monday after the housewarming, Nathan called. He was friendly in the practice way that meant he had thought about how the call should go. Mom, I'm really sorry about Sunday. I should have handled that better. It was a communication issue. What was communicated poorly? A beat. I should have let you know Cynthia's family had already organized everything. Nathan, your father and I drove 2 hours. I made your grandmother's casserole. I know, and I feel terrible about that. He didn't sound terrible. He sounded like someone trying to close out a complaint. Can we get together soon? He asked. Just the 4 of us? Dinner somewhere nice? I recognized the suggestion. It was the same one he had made after every prior disappointment. Dinner somewhere nice, clean table, professional setting. Nobody raises their voice. Everyone acts like things are fine. Things are not actually addressed. Everyone goes home and nothing changes. I don't think dinner is what we need right now, I said. What do you need? Honestly, I need some time to think. And I need you to understand that what happened on Sunday wasn't just awkward. It was hurtful. Not the logistical confusion. The fact that you stood on your porch and asked us to leave. He was quiet. We bought you that house, Nathan. I know, Mom. Not the dishwasher. Not the patio furniture. The house. I know. His voice was smaller now. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not asking you for an answer right now. I'm asking you to sit with it. I ended the call before he could redirect the conversation. The first session with Dr. Reyes was mostly me talking. She asked me to describe my relationship with Nathan from his childhood forward, and I heard myself using the same phrases over and over. He's always been independent. He's always been private. He never really needed much from us. And somewhere around the 20-minute mark, she gently interrupted me. Do you think not needing much from you was the same as not needing you? I sat with that for a while. I had always told myself that raising an independent child was the goal. That Nathan's self-sufficiency was evidence that we had done something right. But listening to myself describe 35 years of a relationship where I was available and he was selective, I started to wonder if what I had mistaken for independence was actually just distance I had learned to excuse. I went home from that appointment and sat in the garden for an hour. We have a small raised bed along the south side of the yard where I grow tomatoes and basil and zucchini every summer. Gerald had built the bed for me 10 years ago. I had not asked him to. He just did it because he noticed I had been looking at seed catalogs. That's what love looks like, I thought. Paying attention, doing things without being asked, showing up. Nathan's name appeared on my phone again that night. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. 3 weeks after the housewarming, Gerald and I drove to see my sister June in Columbus. She's 2 years younger than me, sharp and direct in a way I have always admired, and occasionally found exhausting. She poured iced tea before we even sat down and said, "Tell me what happened." So we did. June listened without interrupting, which is not her default mode. When we finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Did Cynthia ever thank you?" she asked. "For the down payment." I thought about it. She sent a card, a printed one, the kind from a box. She signed it Cynthia and Nathan. Nathan signed his own name on a thank you card to his parents. When June said it out loud, it sounded exactly like what it was. "I always wondered," June said carefully, "if you made it too easy, not just for Nathan, but in general. You are the most capable person I know when it comes to solving other people's problems. It's a gift, and it's also, sometimes, not a gift." I looked at her. "You think I did this? I think you made it very easy not to need you by being so immediately available every time there was a need. That's not blame. That's just an observation." Gerald nodded slowly. It was the nod of someone who had thought the same thing and waited to be given permission to say it. That night, lying in June's guest room, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. I thought about the refrigerator, the apartment move where we rented the truck and loaded the boxes, the time Nathan mentioned his car needed brakes, and Gerald drove to Ashford the following Saturday and took the car to the shop and paid for everything while Nathan slept until noon. We had not raised someone who didn't need us. We had raised someone who had never had the experience of needing us and not being immediately rescued. That thought made everything feel different and heavier, and also somehow clearer. On the drive home from Columbus, Gerald said, "I want to call Martin again." About the gift letter? About the will? We didn't say anything else for a while. We met with Martin the following week. He was not dramatic about it, which is why we have used him for 30 years. He walked us through our options plainly. We could restructure the will, we could establish a trust. We could put certain provisions in place that would require demonstrated relationship maintenance, which he explained was a recognized legal mechanism some families used. We did not do anything dramatic, but we did make changes, quiet, careful changes, not punitive, protective. Gerald put it simply when we left Martin's office, "We worked for what we have. We should decide what happens to it." On the drive home, he added, "I'd like to take that trip to New England this fall, the foliage trip we keep saying we'll do." "Book it," I said. "Just like that? We've been saying we'll do it for 6 years." He booked it that evening on his laptop, sitting at the kitchen table, and I watched him and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something that was mine, not Nathan's mother or Gerald's wife, just mine. 6 weeks after the housewarming, Nathan called with a different energy. Not practice smooth. Something had shifted. "Mom, something happened. I need to talk to you and Dad." "Come here," I said. "Not a restaurant. Come here." He arrived the following Saturday alone. Cynthia's name came up in the first 5 minutes. "Her parents think we gave you too much influence," he said, "over our lives. They think," he looked at the table, "they think the down payment was controlling." Gerald set his coffee cup down very deliberately. "The down payment," I said. "I know how it sounds. It sounds like the people who organized a housewarming and disinvited us are describing us as controlling." Nathan rubbed his face. "I'm not saying they're right. Nathan, are you happy?" He looked up. The question caught him off guard. "I don't know," he said, which was the most honest thing he had said to us in years. Over the next 2 hours, the real picture emerged slowly. Cynthia's parents had been making suggestions about the marriage since before the wedding, and Nathan had been trying to manage both families without telling either one the full story. He hadn't told Cynthia's family how large our contribution was. He hadn't told us that Cynthia's mother had assumed her family would be the primary financial support. When the down payment became known, Pamela had apparently made a series of comments about obligations and strings and influence that had gotten into Nathan's head and stayed there. He had not stood up to any of it. He had just tried to keep everyone comfortable until it became impossible, and then handed us the discomfort to manage. "You sent us away to keep peace with people who weren't paying for anything," Gerald said. He wasn't angry. He sounded tired. "I know," Nathan said. "That is not how I raised you." "I know, Dad. I want you to think about why you didn't tell us any of this," I said. "Not now. I want you to actually think about it. Alone. Without Cynthia's mother's voice in your head." He left in the late afternoon, quieter than he had arrived. I sat on the back porch after he left and thought about something Dr. Reyes had said during our second session. She'd asked me what I was afraid would happen if I stopped managing Nathan's emotional experience. I had said I didn't know. She had waited, and eventually I said, "I'm afraid he'll just stop calling." She had asked, "And if he does, what does that tell you?" I was still working on that answer. The New England trip was everything we had imagined. We drove up through Vermont in the second week of October, when the maples were at full color, and checked into a small inn in Stowe that had been operating since the 80s. The innkeeper, a woman about my age, showed us to a room with a clawfoot tub and a window that looked directly into a tree, so red it seemed unreal. Gerald went for long walks every morning. I sat in the common room and read. We ate at small restaurants and talked to strangers and drove without any particular destination on 2 of the afternoons. On the 3rd night, we had dinner at a farmhouse restaurant, where everything on the menu had been grown within 20 miles, And Gerald ordered us a bottle of wine we would never have thought to order at home. I forgot we were fun, he said. We are deeply fun, I agreed. We laughed, and it was easy, and for 3 hours, nothing outside that table existed. Nathan texted twice during the trip, short messages, just checking in. I responded each time with something brief and warm. I was not punishing him. I was not available in real time. Those are different things. When we got home, there was a card in the mailbox. From Nathan. Handwritten, not the printed kind. He had written, Mom and Dad, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I owe you more than I've given. I'm working on it. I love you. 6 words in the middle that I read 4 times. I owe you more than I've given. Gerald read it over my shoulder. It's a start, he said. Yes. Not finished. No, but it's a start. I put the card on the refrigerator with a magnet. The same refrigerator we had bought Nathan and Cynthia 2 years ago and watched be replaced 3 months later because the style didn't match the new kitchen layout they chose. I left the card up. Cynthia called in November. I was surprised. We had not spoken since the housewarming. Ruth. She paused. Mrs. Caldwell, I didn't know what to call you. Mrs. Caldwell is fine, I said, because it was what felt right at that moment. I owe you an apology, she said. A real one, not a let's move forward one. What happened at the housewarming was wrong, and I knew it was wrong, and I let my mother make the decision anyway because I didn't want the fight. I let her finish. I'm in therapy now, she added. Nathan and I both are. And one of the things I had to look at was why it felt easier to manage my mother than to do the right thing. I appreciate you saying that. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. There's no back, I said. There's only forward. What forward looks like is the question. She was quiet. Can I ask what would help for you? Not for Nathan, not for me. What would help for you? I thought about it. Honesty, I said. When there's a problem, I want to know about it. Not managed, not smoothed over. Just told. I can do that. And I'd like to come see the house, I said. When you're ready. Not a party, just a visit. She said she would like that. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long moment. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel healed. I felt something quieter and more sustainable. Like a window cracked open after a long winter. Thanksgiving that year was smaller than usual. June came with her husband. Gerald's brother Ted drove up from Cincinnati with his wife. 8 people around our dining room table, which is the right number for a table that seats 8. Nathan and Cynthia came for dessert. 2 hours, no obligation, no performance. Cynthia helped me cut the pie, and we talked about her job, which she had recently changed, and whether they might get a dog in the spring. Nathan and Gerald sat in the living room, and I could hear them talking about football, and then about the house, and then, at one point, about something I couldn't quite make out, something quieter. And when I passed the doorway, I saw Nathan leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, and Gerald with his hand briefly on Nathan's shoulder. They stayed for almost 3 hours. When they left, Cynthia hugged me at the door. Actually hugged me, the kind that involved some weight behind it. Thank you for letting us come, she said. Thank you for coming, I said. After they left, June appeared at my elbow. That was different, she said. Yes. Better different, I think so. Ask me in a year. December was gentle. Ask me in a year. Gerald finished restoring an old writing desk he had been working on in the garage for years and put it in the corner of our bedroom where I had always wanted a reading spot. He didn't ask. He just noticed I'd been reading in bed with a flashlight app on my phone because I didn't want to wake him, and he solved the problem. That is still, after 41 years, what I love most about him. On Christmas Eve, Nathan called to say they were going to Cynthia's family for the holiday and asked if they could come see us on the 26th instead. I said yes without hesitation and without the internal negotiation I would have done a year ago, the one where I calculate whether my feelings should count and usually decide they shouldn't. They came on the 26th. Nathan brought a pie from the bakery 2 blocks from their house, the kind we had passed 100 times but never gone into. He said, I figured it was time you tried something from our neighborhood. It was a small thing, but I am 63 years old and I have learned, finally, that a life is assembled almost entirely from small things. Who shows up? Who notices? Who, on a cold Tuesday in December, drives to a bakery they have passed 100 times and thinks of you? We ate the pie at the kitchen table, the four of us. Cynthia told a story about her first week at her new job that made us all laugh. Gerald told a story about his engineering crew that I had heard many times but never got tired of. Nathan asked me about my book club. Actually listened when I answered. Before they left, Nathan went to his car and came back with the box. Inside was a framed photo I had never seen before. The four of us at his college graduation, standing in front of the science building. Everyone squinting slightly into the sun and grinning. I hadn't known anyone had taken it. I had it for years, he said. I found it when we were unpacking boxes at the new house. I kept meaning to do something with it. I looked at the photo for a long time. My younger face. Gerald's hair still mostly dark. Nathan, younger, thinner, that lopsided grin he has had since he was 4 years old. Thank you, I said. I'm sorry it took me this long. Not a big speech, not a list of reasons and explanations, just that. I put the photo on the mantel. Later, after they had gone and Gerald was washing the dessert plates, I stood in the living room looking at it, 4 people in a photograph, squinting into the sun, not knowing yet what the years ahead held. All that joy and all that difficulty folded invisibly into one moment. I thought about the casserole I had made and driven 2 hours to deliver and driven 2 hours home with, still wrapped, growing cold on the back seat. I thought about the $78,000 and what it bought and what it didn't. I thought about the $78,000 and what it doubted. Reyes asking me what I was afraid would happen if I stopped managing Nathan's emotional experience. And I thought, he called. Not because he needed something, not because there was a problem to solve. He called to ask how I was, and he listened when I told him, and then he brought a pie. That is not nothing. In fact, I have come to understand that is very nearly everything. I still have the down payment documentation in our files. Martin updated our will in the fall. Gerald and I booked another trip, a week in the Smoky Mountains in May. I started taking a watercolor class on Thursday evenings, something I said I would do someday for the better part of 2 decades. The silver cardinal print that Nathan wouldn't take the day of the housewarming is hanging in my sewing room now, where I can see it every morning. I decided I didn't need to give it away. It was mine too. Some days the hurt of that Sunday is still there, not as a burning thing, more like a scar that pulls occasionally when the weather changes. I think it will always be there, and I have made a certain peace with that, because here's what I know now. After everything, you can love someone completely and still require that they treat you with basic dignity. Those two things are not in conflict. I spent a lot of years believing they were, and you can build a life that is genuinely yours, with the person you chose, doing things that bring you joy, without waiting for your children to give you permission. That is not selfishness. That is the work. I have been thinking about casseroles, not the one I made for Nathan's housewarming specifically, though that one still sits in my mind more than I expected it to. I mean the idea of a casserole, the hours behind it, the intention, the fact that someone has to choose to make one, to drive it somewhere, to stand on a porch holding it and still believe it will be received. I made that casserole because I believe Nathan would want it. I made it because that is what my grandmother did and her mother before her, and because I thought that kind of love was contagious. That if you showed up with enough warmth for long enough, eventually it would come back around. What I didn't understand until this past year is that love without limits doesn't teach love. It teaches expectation. Nathan never learned to receive a casserole with gratitude because he never had to wonder whether one would come. It always came. We always came. Every problem solved before he had fully understood it was a problem. Every gap filled before he could sit with the discomfort of the gap. I don't say that to excuse what he did. Standing on that porch and asking us to leave was wrong. Letting Cynthia's mother organize a celebration in a house we had funded, without telling us, without considering what it would mean to arrive and be turned away, that was a failure of character. His character, and that has to be named plainly before anything else can be said. But here is what I have learned about cause and effect. After 63 years of living it, consequences are not punishments delivered from outside. They are the natural result of the choices we make, compounding quietly over time until they become impossible to ignore. Nathan had made 1,000 small choices to take the easier road, to manage rather than confront, to keep everyone comfortable rather than do the harder thing. Those choices accumulated into a man who didn't know how to stand up for his own parents at his own front door. And Gerald and I have made our own quiet choices too, to smooth things over, to show up without being asked, to interpret distance as independence rather than what it sometimes actually was, which was a relationship that had never been asked to carry its own weight. The morning after Nathan came to our house and finally told us the truth, I sat in the garden for a long time. The tomatoes were finished for the season. The beds needed turning. I had been meaning to do it for weeks. I got up and I did it. There is something in that I want to hold on to. The doing of the thing you have been putting off. Not because everything is resolved, not because the hurt is gone, but because your life still belongs to you, and the soil still needs turning, and there is work left that is genuinely yours. Nathan is trying now, not perfectly, not without setbacks, but trying in a way that is visible in small concrete things, a handwritten card, a pie from the bakery around the corner from his house, a phone call where he asked how I was and stayed on the line to hear the answer. That is what changed for me this year. I stopped measuring love by grand gestures and started noticing the small ones. And I stopped withholding my own small ones in proportion to the ones I wasn't receiving. I sent Nathan a photo I found of the two of us from his first day of school. No message, just the photo. He called 20 minutes later. We are not where I hoped we would be by now, but I have stopped grieving the relationship I imagined and started tending the one that is actually in front of me. That is the harder work. It is also the only work that matters.